I hope you guys are having a good Monday. I wanted to talk about this topic because I feel like it came up on a couple lives. I did in here. I know it definitely comes up for clients. I feel like I've had a decent amount of experience with this lately. So I feel like, maybe it's not like the most popular money making topic, but actually feeling like you can handle this and deal with this is one of the most money making topics, I think, because it's so often what really holds a lot of us back or keeps us from wanting to lean in, post more, share more, even just like the fear of it. So I want to share quite a few things on this. Again, I feel like I have definitely seen how this can keep someone held back, but I also feel like I've had quite a few of these recently. So let's talk about it. If you have questions or experiences on this that you want to share, obviously feel free to do that too. And our giveaway today is that $100 gift card as a thank you for being here and spending your time with us. So let's dive in. Let's talk about it. So I think first let's say this. I think I have something coming. There's just 10 thoughts in my head. So I think it's important to define what does it mean to even think about going viral, because I feel like that's the whole thing. I think when some people think of that, they're thinking of oh, it needs to have millions of views or something like that. But actually, if you asked me what I consider more of the definition of virality, it would just be you're reaching a significant amount more people than you have as followers. And I think that's important to say, because I feel it can kind of feel all or nothing. It's I either have to go viral to millions, or I just stay in my own little bubble. And actually, for most of us, growth is somewhere in between. And that's actually what we want. We want to be reaching more people, but typically doing that is going to expose us to corners of the internet that are not always our people. And so I think that's really important to say. Hi guys. Hey Hannah, good to see you. Thank you, Crystal. Bennett actually picked it out. I will give him that. We are attached to the hip right now, and so he picked it out, and I was right on. I will wear the blue gingham for you, Bennett. You can hear soft humming in the background, that noise my computer makes when it wants to take off. I think it's my computer. I actually have a new computer sitting right here that I haven't set up yet, because my computer has the fan noise constantly right now, which I'm pretty sure means it's about to leave us. My computer's 5-6 years old at this point, so I think it's I'm done. Hi Stephanie, good to see you. I so appreciated hearing your definition of virality the first time you shared it with me. Happy Monday, Steph. Yeah, I think it's helpful to think about it like that, because I think it can just feel so big in a sense, but it's obviously we want to keep doing this. So I feel since I've been focusing on Reels, I have done the viral thing, I guess, quite a bit. I have had the million plus thing, and I've had the ones where we're just reaching a lot more people, and it always depends. I also feel I have a lot of clients in this. I have a client right now who I feel we've just really nailed things, and she's getting millions of views most of the time when she's posting right now, and so she's definitely in this experience. So I just feel there are so many thoughts on that. My computer is done with the haters. My computer's I cannot. I'm over all of this. People on the internet can find something to be mad about at literally anything. Oh my God, for sure. Yeah, it's my computer, I think. Yeah, hopefully I'll change it out really soon. It's just such a freaking process to set that up. But we will persevere. Okay, so here are some thoughts. The first thought that I feel is important to say. She's making herself known. Okay, so the first one that I feel is very important to say is something that I find incredibly fascinating. And listen, it could just be me, it could just be my content, but maybe it's not. And I will say that this is not just for me. I can think of 2 clients who would say the same. Is literally, I think maybe apart from once, anytime I have had true hater comments where I'm that is so aggressive, so off base, so intense, they have all been men but one. Okay? And I want to say that because I know a lot of us focus on working with women. And so I think sometimes when we think about like this fear of getting all of this hate, like sometimes it can be helpful to be like, well, I'm getting it from like in a really irrelevant group of people that like don't actually impact my business, nor do I want to serve, nor would I take on anyway. So it kind of doesn't fucking matter. So I just want to like level set with that one because it really is true. Like, again, apart from like one and maybe others that I didn't see, because on that one reel that got like well over 1 million, I just pieced out at a certain point, but all men. And like you could say like, of course, because maybe my content triggers them more because I'm talking about women and money, but I just want to say that where, again, I'm not saying like you could never get a woman that's a hater or no women are haters, but I am saying that I think it is very interesting to say like, there's something to that, and like not worrying about that if that's not who you serve in any way, shape, or form can actually be really helpful. You missed tech support. I hear that. Michelle's have always been women. Yeah, and I mean, listen, it just could be different, right? It's not like it has to be one way, but I do think that sometimes that's helpful to think about. Like when I'm talking about women and money, who I'm pissing off the most typically is men. And I don't serve men. So like it's easy for me to write that shit off really quickly. Because I don't give a fuck what they think, and actually I'm going to use it as content. So the content makes itself, right? So I think that's another thing to think about is like sometimes when you're getting these comments, it's usually from someone that's like totally irrelevant and not a right fit person for you anyway. And two, it's actually really good content that you can use to draw in your right fit people. So whether it's men or women, or maybe it is, maybe you're getting it from all women, I guarantee you, if you're getting those type of comments, they're not the people who would be hiring you, right? No, but just blocks all men. I mean, I feel like that should be my move from now on. I'm like learning my lesson. And I'll usually just delete a comment. I don't even block it. And now I'm like, oh, I actually have to go through the effort of blocking it because these men are persistent. They come back. So good rule of thumb. But I feel like it's just helpful to be like, it's typically someone who is not even close to your right fit client, not even in the range of it, not even like in the realm of that at all. And when that happens, all it does is give you an opportunity to create content that reaches more of your right fit people, because they will also be on your team or pissed off about that too. I recently did that in a reel. Some guy commented some really dumb shit about like women in success being narcissists and all of this stuff, and got so much good feedback about that. And a guy commented on that one and was like, wow, the way the women rally in these comments. And I was like, yeah, like that's the thing. Like the hater comments almost create your content for you sometimes and make it even easier to connect with your people, feel really, really like in relationship with them, because you're both like, fuck this, and you get it. And so that's something I really want to say too, is like, if you think about a lot of this stuff as content to draw in more of the right people, content that you can use, content that's basically written for you, it gets like kind of exciting in a sense. Not that you're like, oh, I just want my account to be all about haters necessarily, but I do think it's really helpful to be like, I will let that help me. I will let that be supportive to me. I will find a way to make that serve me. And I think that that's really, really empowering. Michelle said they're almost always responding to the hook with no context and have almost never read the caption. Hard to have a conversation with someone when they only heard the first sentence. Totally. Thank you, Tara. Thank you for loving that reel. Yeah, and I think like for me, that's part of the hater thing that I feel so empowered around, is like, I will always use that. I will always leverage that, and I will always make that work for me. Or I'll just delete it if I don't care. But like, right, you could do both. Like I screenshotted that thing and then I deleted it and then I blocked him, right? So I think just remembering that is really important, of like, you're the one that gets to control what you do with that and how you make it work for you. So that's number, I don't know, 2 probably. The third thing that I always try to remember in situations like this too is that truly mean this. There's like almost one singular way that you're gonna go really, really viral. Like if we are back to talking about the like millions of views, and that's almost always because people disagree. And And so there's a ton of commentary either way, right? Like the reels where people are like, yeah, right on, that's so good. Like they'll probably perform well, but they're typically not going to be the ones that are like, you know, going to the moon, which is okay. We don't need all of them to go to the moon. But it is important to remember that, like, I think so many of us are like, I want to have huge reach and a huge impact and all of this stuff, but we're trying to get it while thinking that we can get it without this type of conflict or negative feedback. And I just think, unfortunately, that's for the most part is not how social is working right now. And so a lot of people back themselves into a corner where they're like, I want really big reach. I want really, big impact. I want to hit millions of views. I want all of this stuff. But I definitely like don't want anyone to say anything in this way. Or I definitely don't want like haters to come for me. And I think we have to realize that like those live together right now on social. Like that is part of the game. And if you're constantly trying to guard against that, you're making it impossible for yourself to get that amount of reach that you're wanting. So you can decide, well, fine, then I don't want that amount. That's totally okay too, right? Like you don't have to want that to have success in your business. But also don't keep telling yourself the lie that if you just are perfect enough, or you write your hook just right, or you put enough context in the caption or whatever the fuck, right? That will prevent any of that. Like Michelle was saying, a lot of people aren't going to spend any time reading that. They're going to see one thing, it's going to piss them off, they're going to make a comment, and that's it. Like you cannot guard against that. Hey, Christina, our Instagram guru says Instagram doesn't differentiate between haters and happy engagement. It's all engagement. Exactly. Like this is why that's almost what's required to have that huge, huge, huge reach, because it's more engagement and people like fighting amongst themselves in the comments. It's really funny. One of my clients had this one video go super, super, super viral on TikTok, and it kind of like started off like a really big leap for her. And what actually happened in the comments had so little to do with the video. It was people fighting over how she was pronouncing her name and all of this back and forth about it. And it was like so controversial how she was pronouncing her own fucking name, which is so funny. I won't give more context to it because I don't want to share her name. But my point is, like, what Christina is saying is true. All engagement was good. Like that was so ridiculous that everyone was fighting about her name and not the point of the video. But that was such a quantum leap moment for her, because then so many people actually really did like the context of the video. And it really started like a chain reaction for her from there in terms of like business growth and things like that. So I think that there is really something to be said for what does it look like to welcome this as part of growth? What does it look like to see some of this as not only part of it, but even the path to it? I feel like when you do that, there is something that makes it feel like you're owning it versus like it's something you're trying to keep from happening to you, right? So if I'm looking at reels from other people in my industry who have millions of views and these don't seem to have these hater comments, is it more likely that they're getting them and deleting them, or do you think it really just depends? I mean, I think it probably depends on the context a bit. I think I'm talking, Michelle, I think you're talking more to like, you're more taking like the influencer route of like sharing like outfits and different things like that. And so I think like people asking for links and different things like that can obviously like create a lot of that. But I think if you're taking more of like, let's say like a coach service provider stance, or like I'm taking a really clear stance on this thing and I'm selling this thing and I'm having a really like locked in message around like whatever, like women making money online or how to grow in this way or whatever, I do think there's like naturally a little bit more like disagreement there than like cute dress. But like I'm not saying it's entire, like I'm not saying someone has to be mad about your dress for you to go viral. I'm just saying like in the context of kind of like all of this, I feel like for the majority of people, when you have a really clear message like that, there does tend to be some of that friction that actually causes like growth. But I would also argue to a certain extent that even in the industry of you're talking about with like influencers and stuff, a lot of people do make negative comments on those, and there's like all these hate accounts about certain people like that, and like I'm sure they delete them, but even some of those, like I do think that's what creates some level of traction, you know? Hey Danielle, thank you. Let's see what Christina said. She said, every niche has controversial topics, i.e. in fashion, tucking is controversial. Instagram hashtags are controversial. Find one related to your audience, take a position on it, and keep doing it. Love. Yeah. So again, it's not like, and I think the point is like, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. Like, nobody needs millions of views necessarily to like have success in their business. That's not the point. But I think the idea of like trying for that while also trying to guard against that is like really the point I want to make, where it's like, that's what's crazy making. My fashion client went viral over tucking, very, very viral, and lots of agreements in the comments of how, or I'm imagining you're saying lots of disagreements in the comments of how to tuck, right? But like, that's such a good one. I think Sarah and I had one that went viral where we were talking about like, should we throw away all of our no-show socks or something stupid like that. There's always something, to Christina's point. But again, it's not that you have to do that, but if that's what you want, there's something to that, right? And I think most of the people that get that level of virality or views like trigger people in some way, and that's a thing, you know? And again, it doesn't mean you have to like lean into that really hard, but I do think it's part of the game. Michelle said, I feel like I need better boundaries around this, like to decide decide once what I want to do with them versus deciding in the moment each time. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, do you always delete? Do you always whatever? I mean, personally for me, I'm like, I do decide in the moment. I don't know if that's helpful or not. I don't think you have to do that, but I'm like, do I want to leave this here to prove a point? Do I want to like screenshot this and delete it? Do I want to engage in this conversation? Like, maybe I do. There was one I think I did, I actually did a reel on this one too, where some guy was like, kind of totally changed the topic and made the point about like, how do we get more men to grow businesses? And I left his comment and I made a comment on it because that really served me. So every time I look at it, I'm just like, how does this serve me? If it doesn't, it can get deleted and fuck that. And if it does, I want to like do something with it. Like, I think if we think of it all as leverageable, that's when it gets exciting. All comments are good comments. All comments can be used to your advantage. All comments can create leverage for you. You just have to decide, you know, how you want that to be and how you want to use it, what you want that to look like. Christina, feel free if you want to share, if you give clients like hard and fast rules on that. But for me, that's just how I've done it, if that's helpful. I haven't bought new age socks and I haven't tried them on. Maybe I'll do that during this conversation. I have to tell you, I do like the higher socks now, I'm just saying. I don't always know if I look good in them, but I find them quite comfy. Okay, so that's another point, is you don't have to want it, but we have to stop pretending that getting it doesn't come with that pushback. I have a client who is in like a mental health kind of niche, which I guess, you know, has some very clear, how do I want to say this? Like, there's very clear views and for a lot of people in this niche about like how you should show up, how you should say things, how you should frame things. And she's gone viral quite a bit, but she's always kind of like very hesitant about it. And it's like one of the things we've been working on a lot is like, she literally knows how to do it. She knows the formula. She's very good at it from a social media perspective, but there's always this part of her that's kind of like bracing for impact of like, I'm going to have all of this. And she's really having to rework her brain to like, that's part of it. And being able to find my resilience in that and figure out what that looks like for me is my path to growth, is my path to what I want next, because her goal really is to reach a lot of people and have a really big conversation around this topic. And she's not going to be able to do that if she doesn't have some resilience around this, right? And so I think that it's just really important to say, like, that is part of the work if you want the big reach, right? And I think social media is maybe more aggressive now than it's ever been, so I get why that's not easy. And I'm certainly not talking as someone who has massive reach and has been through it in any huge way. So like, I don't even know what that feels like, but I will say that it's pretty obvious when you look at it, of like, when you're creating content that is emotional in nature, that creates a reaction in people, that's the content that is going to perform. That's the content that's going to go viral. And it's also the content that's going to make people have a reaction that's maybe positive or maybe negative and that they want to tell you about, right? Like, that's kind of how it is. So I feel like recognizing that like that is the content that performs is so useful. If you're trying to, again, guard against that all the time, it's fine, but you can pretty much guarantee you're not growing your business in the way you could. You can pretty much guarantee that you're not getting the reach that you could, and if that's okay, that's okay, right? But if it's not okay, then the work is not, how do I frame this so I don't get more haters? It's, how do I find resilience against that? How do I find safety in that? How do I find a setup that feels good to me? Again, for me, I'm an Enneagram 8, so I feel like this matches me very well. I'm like, well, I'll just use it to my advantage. I'll just take control of the situation. I will screenshot that and I will talk about it or whatever. But also I think sometimes it really is, and I have this conversation with clients a lot, so this is the next thing I want to talk about, is I feel like it really is a call to a lot of people to get really, really, really clear, locked in on their message and back themselves in it. Because that's another thing that I see is like, I had one client go super, super, super viral, and she was like, I'm deleting this post. And I was like, what are you talking about? Why are we deleting it? And she was like, I'm going to be totally honest with you. Like, I should have said this differently, and I cannot back myself in this in the way that I need to right now, and I need to take a step back from that. And I was like, I fully respect that. Like, I get that. And it was like a way for us to be like, okay, how can you back yourself? How can you use kind of these type of hooks, but to also really be able to feel very in sync and aligned with that and. And I feel like for so many people, like they'll kind of say something, not think about it too much, or say it kind of offhanded, and then, you know, be in a situation where people are pushing back on it and they're really uncomfortable because they're not fully backing that. So I think that's something really helpful to see too. Like, is there something you're scared you're going to hear back from people? Is there feedback that you're really freaking out that you might get? Amazing. Clean that up. Like, that's your opportunity to be like, oh, I need to keep my side of the street clean so that if somebody had something to say about that, I'll have my back on that all day long, right? Like, for example, like the guy telling me in the thing that I was like, whatever, a narcissist that lacked something. I forget. It was something funny, like lacked social awareness or something like that. I'm like, this is not a concern. Like, he could find 50 other people that will come say that to me, and I like back myself fully in the fact that that is not a thing. Let's go. Or the guy that was like, well, we should really be thinking about how to get more men to start business. Like, I will have that fight with you all day. That is a hill I will die on. I will back myself in that. Whatever that is for you. I mean, those are obviously very generic things. Or like, even though one of the reels that I had that went the most viral was about paying off our nanny student loans. Like, and someone was telling me how, what was the word? I don't know. Like, selfish I was to like be sharing it like this and da-da-da. And I was like, oh no, I did do this for selfish reasons. Like, part of, like, right? Like, I will back myself in that. So I think that's something that's like really helpful when you're having that fear around it, and you, especially if you have really specific fears around what you think that you might get feedback on or what's really freaking you out. Like, it's just such an opportunity to be like, if I got that comment, could I back myself in that? How would I feel about that? What stand could I take on that? That is so wildly useful, because then you're just having dialogue, and or you're just deleting it because that it's irrelevant to you. But when you feel like someone's coming at you with something that you kind of feel a little bit like, oh, I took that one step too far, I shouldn't have said it quite like that, or actually I don't really know if I like fully back that piece of my message, like, that's part of what makes it uncomfortable to really get reach, really go viral. So I think that's a huge thing to think about too. Hi, Roxana. Good to have you. Haven't caught me in a year. Happy to have you. Thank you for being here. Okay, so that's another piece that I would say. Like, I think that, yes, we need to recognize that it's so often about them and their stuff and not our stuff at all. Like, the man that was, like, very mad about successful women, like, that's his. But also being like, if that was triggering to me, like, if somebody calling me a narcissist or whatever was, like, really a thing for me, like, ooh, then I have like my side of the street to clean up on that too. Why is that triggering for me? What behavior am I demonstrating that makes me feel some type of way about that? What fears do I have around that? Why is that coming up for me? Cool. let me do some of that work so that when someone crazy on the internet says that, it doesn't feel like a reflection of me. It truly feels like I know that's their thing. I cleaned up my side. Pre-prepare for flack, like a mindset exercise that could become something like a private PR document. I love that, Nova. Roxana says, loving the reminder and permission to prepare ahead of times for things potentially going wrong. 100%. And not so much that you're like, oh my God, like this could hurt my business. I think more so like, how do I let myself invite some of this in because I feel prepared for it? It reminds me of like, if someone's like, I'm really capped at a certain spot in my business, I'm like, okay, if you got 50 clients tomorrow, what, like, could your business handle it? And they're like, oh my God, no. Like, if we got 50 clients tomorrow, I have no idea what we would do. And I'm like, okay, well, that's part of why you're plateaued in your business. Like, we have to figure out what that would look like and how to set your business up for that. And so you're not kind of putting that out there where you're energetically capping yourself because you know you're not prepared for it. I think this kind of stuff is the exact same thing. Yeah, like truly, I think it's so similar. It's like, I am not putting myself out there because I'm scared I'm going to hear this thing. And so I'm putting this cap on myself of like, don't reach the parts of the internet where it might hear this thing. It's just going to happen sometimes. And so if I can feel prepared for it, if I can feel like that's just part of the game of doing business, like it's easy to invite that in. If I feel like that's really going to be a big problem for me, of course I'm going to cap myself, right? Roxana says, right, it makes me more confident to put myself out there in a bold way because I'm well prepared. Exactly. Like 1000%. And I think there is a difference between like, is it comfortable and are you prepared? I also want to name that. Like, I don't know anyone who finds it really, really comfortable to like be attacked by strangers on the internet. Like even when I get some of these, you know, hater comments or whatever, it's not like, I'm like, oh, that's so comfortable. I'm like, ugh, I feel a thing, but also I know how to handle it. I know how I'm going to deal with it. I know how to process that emotion quickly. So I think that's also really important to remember. I think sometimes we're expecting ourselves to get to this like robotic, non-human place of all of this. And I think the truth is like, it's fucking weird that this is how we all interact as humans anymore. So fucking weird that this is like how we communicate and how we are on the internet. And I think it's especially weird for a lot of us that like didn't grow up with it, but have adjusted to this. You know what I mean? Like, it's so weird. Sorry, my throat hurts a bit. So I think it's like okay to say like it feels weird, it doesn't feel great, no matter how much you don't believe it, no matter how much you're used to it, it still has weird sensations associated with it because it's objectively weird that this is how we engage with one another. And you can still feel confident, prepared, ready, and able to handle it and all of those things, right? It's just like anything else in business. Like, it's not comfortable to have someone like ask for a refund or something, but if you have like a good setup and you feel confident and prepared and really, really, you know, secure in your offer or whatever, it's easier to handle. It still doesn't mean it feels good. It doesn't mean that you don't have a reaction to it. It doesn't mean that you're not a human. So I feel like remembering that is really important too. Like you're gonna have that baseline reaction of whatever your kind of norm is. You know, like you're gonna fight, flight, freeze, whatever. My social media trauma response almost is always fight. Like, you know, someone will say something and I'm like, oh, let's go. And I have to remind myself, like, okay, I'm allowed to have this feeling for a few minutes, but like this is actually not like the best use of my like time, energy, emotional capacity, etc. Level set, handle it how I handle it. For someone else, it might be like freeze. Okay, I need to let myself like process the freeze for a minute. I need to move through it, etc. Or, you know, maybe you want to get off social media for a little bit. Maybe it means you need to take a break for a little bit. All of it's fine as long as you build the self-trust that you can handle it, that it doesn't harm your business. If anything, it helps it, and that you can move forward. Like, that's really what matters. It's not those initial reactions. It's not, you know, that like initial whatever, you know, 20 minutes after you see something like that. it's really the proof and the self-trust that like over time it's fine. Nothing bad has happened to me. I am not unsafe. I have a way that I handle this. I have things that I manage around this. Like, I think that that's so important. And again, it doesn't mean that it has to be initially comfortable, but like that foundation under it of like, I am safe. I trust myself to handle this. All is well. That's the gold in it. And so, yeah, Diane said it's so weird. Love your take. Thank you. Yeah, it's just so weird. And so if you can hold the both and of like, okay, this is weird. I can have weird feelings about it. I can process my emotions. I can have a trauma response to it. Whatever. Like all is accepted here. And I trust myself to handle it. I trust that it's not like taking anything down in my business in any way. I trust that it's just some random human on the internet that like can't do anything apart from make a comment, you know? I just feel like that's so empowering. And I think that it really is like next level CEO shit. Because I feel like for so many people, again, to go back to that statement, it's like they want the big business, they want the big money, they want the big reach, but they feel completely unprepared or unwilling to deal with all that entails. And I think that is so much of the work, is to be like, I have to trust myself at that level. I have to be prepared at that level. I have to not only be okay with it, but in some cases, even welcome it in, right? It's like we always talk about willingness in business. Are you willing to stretch? Are you willing to fail? Are you willing to have the hard thing happen? That's usually what creates success. And I think this is exactly the same. Are you willing to have all the haters? Are you willing to have the comments? Are you willing to have to deal with that? Are you willing to have to delete? Are you willing to have to block? Are you willing to use it to your advantage? Like when you build that willingness reservoir, things get easier. When you build the self-trust behind that, things get a lot easier. When you're like, I want all of that and I have no willingness for any of this, you're backed into a corner almost every time. So I feel like it's just important to name that. And again, you could be like, I don't want that thing enough to have willingness for all of that. Amazing. No problem. That's totally fine. You are so entitled to that. But don't lie to yourself, right? Don't put yourself in that position of being like, I'm pretending that all of this I can have without an ounce of this. Right? It's just not real. Like, it's just not. And I feel like I'm always like the bearer of bad news in these situations where I'm like, you can't have a business where you don't sometimes have to work, or you can't have social media where you don't sometimes have to shit. But it's true. And I think when we acknowledge and embrace that, it's easier to create content that actually does get traction. Like, I remember having this conversation with a client a couple of years ago where it's like, are you creating content to not piss people off, or are you creating content because it's actually what you care about? It's actually what you want to say. It's actually your message. It's actually speaking to your ideal people. You would be so surprised how many people are unconsciously creating content to not piss other people off. Unconsciously creating content to please others, right? And then they're like, why am I not growing? Why am I not making more sales? That's why. So these are my observations. That's all I got. Take them, leave them, want that, don't want that. It really doesn't matter, right? I think also remember that sometimes you may have a thing that you want to share. That's really like, I'll have this often where like, I'm like today, I shared a reel that I think is a good example of this. Like I just had something I wanted to share. I knew that it probably wasn't going to be something that really popped or really got a lot of virality because I don't think it was it wasn't framed for that, let's say that. And so just like it's okay to be like, okay, sometimes I'm gonna have to deal with the backlash. It's also okay to be like, sometimes I'm gonna share something that like doesn't go massively viral because it's just what I care about, and that's okay too. So I just wanted to remind you of that. But I hope this was helpful. Again, not like the ultimate expert here, though I feel like I have dealt with it a lot and so have my clients. And so just a reminder, that willingness and that self-trust make a really, really big difference in this area, and feeling like you can handle this. It's everything, and it's what the haters can't ultimately touch. So I hope you guys have a beautiful week. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions as you watch the replay or anything, let me know. All right, thanks guys for being here. Bye.